and welcome to this next episode of Performance Cafe. And I'm glad to have you here with me today as we get further into this whole concept of accountability. I'll put that down, it's hot and I can't talk without my hands. Right. So today our topic is why we don't hold people accountable. And the reason for that, I think, is because either when we do, we feel they'll be scary or we'll be scary. And we don't like scary situations. So hear me out, because I think we've been missing a trick with accountability. So I think the first thing is that it's scary from two perspectives. Firstly, we are told to fix people, and it's the biggest joke because all the husbands that I get to coach, whose wives I've coached, come to me and say, my wife says I must come to you so you can fix me. Right? It's meant in a joke, but I think sometimes we feel that way. We feel like I have to fix this team member that's not performing. I have to fix my husband, my child, right? So firstly, it's scary because they become my responsibility, and it doesn't always work that way. But the problem that we have is the moment that when we get scary or when other people get scary, one of the things that happens is the limbic brain commands the blood to flow away from your neocortex where you think and where you have reasoning, and it pushes it out towards your arms and your legs so you can run fast and fight hard. Ever wondered why when you're in the middle of a very difficult situation you don't sneeze and you don't cough? It's actually your body that is shutting down those functions. So the digestive system is one of the places it takes blood from to put through to the arms and the legs so that you can just run fast or fight as hard as you can. So that means that when either participant enters into this accountability discussion, their limbic brain has them prepared to run, fight, or freeze. Think of it. We know that it causes fright, which the fright is part of this whole process that then helps us set off the other three. So why do I say that we're scared that people will get scary? I mean, very often when we're holding someone accountable, they are in a subordinate to us. I hate that word, but it helps for the present context. They're subordinate to us. So therefore, we should be commanding respect. We should be able to stay in control of the situation. Well, actually, what we do is we're scared of causing a stir because we're not sure how they're going to take what we're about to tell them. The problem with this is we then avoid telling them that there's a problem. This perpetuates the problem because, of course, if people don't know they're doing something wrong, they can't know that they even need to fix it, never mind how they need to fix it. The other thing that we have is we're scared of causing a new problem. So let's say I call in someone and I have an accountability discussion with them. They comply, they do what I ask them to do. But at the same time, they then become passive aggressive in another situation, or they start, causing politics at the office. So what we're scared of is that we're going to raise the issue. We might actually manage to get through the issue. We might achieve some form of compliance, but that there'll be a spin-off on the other side. So I can understand why that would be a cause of concern, because both of these, it makes the situation worse whether you do or whether you don't. But remember, in not dealing with the problem, you are freezing performance, and that is you choose to freeze. So not only do you lock them into what they're doing, but you're also locking yourself into what you are doing. And this is how we know when it's happening. So imagine you've got someone new, they just start, they make a little mistake, and you go, I'm sure it was a once-off. Let's not blow it out of proportion. That's a freeze. You're freezing them and you're freezing yourself by not doing something about it. And what I dislike is at this point, because the person is new, because it is the first time this kind of mistake is made, it's actually so easy to just chat it through and go, hey, we don't do things this way around here. Let me show you what we would normally do. Right? It's an easy discussion. No one is getting exceptionally emotional. It's an easy fix. But what do? We leave it, and it happens again and again. And by the time it sort of happened the third or the fourth time, we go, well, I need to deal with it, but actually it's gone on for so long, I can't address it now. So what happens is I'm going to look silly if I raise it now. So I'm not going to address it. And then we freeze ourselves and the person into that whole dynamic again. Then at some point in time, this becomes entirely intolerable, right? It's unmanageable, or it is creating too much risk. It's maybe creating conflict at the office. And where do you need to go? You go, well, I can't let this go on. I'm going to have to come out guns blazing or else. So we go straight from freeze to fight, from not saying anything to bringing it all on. And that, I think, is where we miss a trick with accountability, is that we wait too late to have a discussion. And then by the time we have the discussion, it's fraught. And that's the time where we're not worried about whether they become scary, because we become scary. And why do we become scary? Because the best offense is a good defense. Because we are scared and because we are under pressure, we become scary. So we can see how our limbic system in this process is actually upsetting the whole situation, because the intelligence that we need is robbed. The emotional intelligence, the common sense thinking and cognitive intelligence, it gets put to the back seat. And apparently our limbic brain thinks that you shouldn't bring your brain to a knife fight. But I don't think that that's quite the case. So the problem that I have with this whole concept of initial avoidance, when we could be speaking to someone very reasonably about what's going on, the first thing is, because of avoidance, the problem continues and it causes more of this poor performance. The problem is that the management of that poor performance is not then as much hard work for the person, actually performing poorly, as what it is for that person's manager. So what's happening is, when we don't address those issues, we're actually making more work for ourselves, not just from having this discussion at a point, but every time we sort of softening the blow, every single time we're actually making work for ourselves and putting stress on ourselves as managers. Now, the problem's not going to resolve itself, right? So we have a ticking and growing time bomb. And the problem is that this poor performance not only forces us to be together more often and have to work at fixing these things more often, but it's also putting strain on the relationship. So this is the one person you do not want to be in a room with, and you're constantly forced back into that relationship, into that negative environment, dealing with this negative behavior. Next up, the stress is exacerbated by the fact that other team members see the poor performance, they see you tolerating it, and therefore they think, okay, I can also perform poorly. It's okay. It's entirely fine. So therefore, the knock-on effect is not just the impact it has on you and this individual, but it also has on the rest of the team. Now, each person in the team who sees this and starts falling into the same habit adds more pressure to the manager, who has to give more hard work into this poor relationship that they don't want to be in. And then, of course, just because life isn't fair, the worst of it all is when employees see the manager dealing with a poor performer, but doing so very poorly. So if you don't deal with them, if you go into avoidance, they notice that. And if you go to the extreme opposite side and you go into that fight, then they also judge you for that. Because why are you losing your dignity? Why are you robbing the person of their dignity when you could have just had a discussion? But now we understand why we get scary, right? And why maybe holding someone accountable is as scary as a process as what the word is when we looked at it last week. So the message here is, whether you deal with poor performance and holding people accountable, it's a lose-lose situation. If you do, something might go wrong. If you don't, something might go wrong. But why? How did we get here? I mean, we all understand at some level that feedback actually is good for us, that we grow through feedback. So why is this so darn scary? Well, the answer is actually quite easy. Have you ever been taught a positive approach to dealing with a poor performer? The answer is probably not. So how many times have we heard a manager saying, I'm here to manage, not to be popular? It's because we've okayed, we've really socially accepted that having a position of power means that we do not have to be kind, that we do not have to be accommodating. And we're seeing that changing now because of coaching. But before we get to that, even when using constructive feedback in a conversation, because of this ability or because of this norm that we have for being okay with power, with you people using their power, using coercion to get things done. Even when we get constructive feedback in a conversation, we are sure that that person is pulling a punch and being insincere, even when they're not, even when they're doing their best to really help us. And that's because we're so used to expecting power, that we're so used to expecting hard conversations as employees and team members, that we go into it going like, okay, this person's being kind of nice. What's going on here, right? One of the great examples that please is not a good example is the feedback sandwich. So as an attempt to softball feedback, constructive criticism, we find that people will say, use the sandwich feedback model. Firstly, the first thing you say is a positive thing. The middle thing, the hamburger patty, is actually the constructive criticism. And the third piece is a positive thing. And people still know that that is a softball. People still know that a hard discussion is being had. So one of two things is going to happen. They're either going to obsessively focus on the hamburger and the patty because that's where the negative stuff is, or they're going to do the opposite and go, well, I'm just going to overlook the hamburger and go for the buns on each side, because when we're taking a look at the buns on each side, that's all good stuff. So it couldn't have been such a bad thing because it was kind of hidden in the middle, sitting in the middle. So I'm just going to go with the good stuff. So part of this, again, is related to a part of our brain, and that's the amygdala. It senses danger. So the concept is that when caveman was walking through the forests and across the savannas, everything that moved, everything that changed color, everything that would alert the senses to danger, because if you weren't alert to danger, you would be eaten. So as easy as that. So at any point in time, because of this legacy, feedback or accountability is associated with that. Sometimes both by the giver and the receiver, because I've never known someone to give feedback that's really hard who wasn't as stressed out as the potential receiver, because it just has this stereotype to it, right? It just has this air to it. So what happens is when we go into that feedback, we are so primed for a fight. But what if we create a culture which embraces accountability instead of making it even scarier than possible? So the first thing I think that we can do is feedback fast. So, for example, I was once told that when we take a look at flying from Cape to Cairo, a lot of the advertisement boards will just show a little aeroplane on this really straight line. It actually doesn't work that way. What happens is pilots will still fly beacon to beacon to beacon to beacon to beacon to beacon to beacon. So the small course corrections help them stay on course. And the beacons are the points they've got to reach to make sure that they are on that course. So what if we keep in touch with employees and speak to them once a week, once every 2 weeks, to check in, to say, how's that project going? Are you coming up against any hurdles? Is there anything that I can help you with? Where's your thinking? What's the next steps you're going to take? Just to keep in touch, just to make sure that when you see there's a possibility and there's been a small deviation, even if you're dealing with it retroactively, at least it is being dealt with, and we reduce the risk of going from here to here to here and then having a bigger angle to have to cover to catch up with where we had to be. Again, those are the kinds of discussions that can be held very casually. over a cup of coffee. It isn't, now give me a strict performance report of everything that you've done and everything you're going to do and how this is going to work, right? It's just about checking in with the person and making sure that they're also comfortable. Even if they're doing what you're expecting them to do, check in and make sure that they are on board with what they have to do. Next, sometimes things do go wrong and we do get to the point where we've gone a little bit beyond the beacon that we wanted to be at. Have a conversation, not an interrogation. When something has gone wrong, approach the subject with curiosity. And here we come back to coaching. One of the good ways to teach someone to coach, is to ask a lot of questions. And when we're asking those questions, we want to really learn how this person thinks. How did they get to where they are in this process? And through asking the questions, by them just telling us how we got there, they will ask us, or they will tell us where things have gone wrong, and they might even work out for themselves where the error occurred. You know, it's that thing of things sound great inside your head, and the moment you start verbalizing them, then you really need to get your words in order, and then you properly think things through. So next time something goes wrong, ask questions and be part of the solution. Don't do an interrogation and then get your limbic system and your amygdala into the conversation, because it's not really going to help find a logical solution to the problem. And then, last but not least, I have to quote my mother, who was a great seamstress. She said, you always measure twice and you cut once. And in this particular case, I want to ask you, build a relationship with each team member. You see, what happens is, if I don't know who I am as a manager and I don't know who the team member is, there are a lot of variables that are left open around both our motivation and our abilities. But if I learn who I am and I learn who you are, and we build a relationship, already there's place to see where things will go wrong. And what happens is, the moment we can predict what can go wrong, we can actually manage for it. So for example, I'm an extrovert. If an introvert works for me, I already know what's going to happen. I'm going to talk much like I'm talking now, and they're going to keep quiet. And if I don't learn to stop and check, do they understand? Did it make sense? What do they think is the best way forward? I'm setting them up for failure. And by extension, I'm setting myself up for failure. So what happens is we find managers saying, I'm too busy to have coffee with all of these people all of the time. But what actually is happening is that if you build that relationship, you'll be able to be more proactive. When things go wrong, you'll have a positive relationship in which to have a difficult conversation, and actually that will grow the relationship. It won't break it down. But when you hardly ever hear from your manager and you only hear from them when they've got something harsh to say to you, then when they do come at you, you don't know who they are, you don't know how to interact with them, and vice versa. And that just adds a whole lot of different dynamics that we don't need. So I hope that I've given you a little bit of food for thought when it comes to dealing with how we hold people accountable. And I hope I've pointed out ways that can show you that it doesn't always have to be the end of the world when these things happen, when things go wrong. If we build a relationship, we've got something to work on. When things go wrong, and they will, we've actually got a leg to stand on. And so I hope that you have enjoyed this episode with me. Thirsty me now. So I look forward to seeing you at next week's episode of Performance Cafe, where we'll carry on with accountability. I've got some exciting stuff coming up. And remember, if you've enjoyed this session, if you've enjoyed this discussion, hello coach, this is a discussion, not a session, please look us up. We stream on all the platforms and we're available on YouTube as well. And I'll see you then.